Welcome to Horrible Fates, where the most unexpected and tragic endings to seemingly ordinary lives are examined. We will take some time to explore the darkness that can lurk just beneath the surface of everyday existence. Keith Mccallister was a 61-year-old married man from Long Island, New York. Keith was described as being a beloved husband, father, stepfather, grandfather, and a good friend to many. It was July 17, 2025. Keith and his wife Adrian would make their way to the Nassau Open MRI facility located on Old Country Road in Westbury, New York. Westbury is a village in the town of North Hempstead in Nassau County on the north shore of Long Island. Inside the building, Adrian Jones Mccallister found herself lying on a table. The low, constant hum of the MRI machine was the only sound in the sterile room. The sound was so commonplace to the technicians at Nassau Open MRI that they no longer heard it. To Adrian Jones Mccallister, the sound of the MRI was a necessary inconvenience. It would be the last little hurdle before she could go home. Following her MRI, Adrian asked the technician to retrieve her husband, as it wasn't easy for her to get up off the table on her own. The technician gave a friendly laugh as he stepped out of the room. "Keith," Adrian called, her voice echoing from within the MRI suite. Her husband, a sturdy man with a friendly smile, soon appeared within the doorway. Swaying around his neck was a heavy 20-pound metal chain and lock that he used for weight training purposes, an accessory that was familiar to those at the facility as Keith had worn it on previous visits. Keith presented a warm smile to his wife as he proceeded to step inside the room. No one knew in the moment, but that step was about to change everything. The moment Keith crossed the threshold, the MRI's invisible, powerful magnetic field seized the chain that was dangling around his neck. Adrian let out an audible gasp as she witnessed the machine snatch and pull her husband in. The innocent chain had transformed into a lethal projectile, violently ripping Keith and slamming him up against the humming machine. Keith struggled against the unforeseen magnetic pull. The technician and Adrian both scrambled frantically, trying with all their might to pull Keith free, but the force was simply too great. Adrian began begging the technician to turn off the machine. "Please, do something," she cried out, tears welling up in her eyes as she tried to find a way to free her husband. "He went limp in my arms," Adrian would later recount. The magnet's pull on Keith inevitably became a fatal embrace. Emergency responders would arrive to the scene, and they did all they could to try and free the man. For nearly an hour, Keith was pinned to the MRI machine before they finally were able to free him from its clutches. Keith was then rushed to the hospital nearby. Doctors and staff began working on Keith immediately, but as they tried to save him, he suffered a heart attack. This first heart attack was followed by multiple subsequent heart attacks. In the end, Keith's heart gave out. The trauma his body had been put through had been too much, and he was pronounced dead later that day. For Keith's wife Adrian, the image would be seared into her memory. The sound of the humming machine, the friendly, final smile on her husband's face, and the sheer terror when the ordinary became monstrous. It was a tragedy that was both shocking and entirely preventable. A painful reminder of the critical importance of safety protocols in the sterile, unyielding world of medical technology. I want to send my deepest condolences to all of Keith's family and friends. As tragic as Keith's death was, it was not the first death to occur within an MRI suite. This next story takes us back to 2001 at the Westchester Medical Center located at 100 Woods Road, Valhalla, New York. Michael Columbini, a brown-haired 6-year-old with a recent brain surgery now behind him, was sedated and in position for his MRI scan. Inside the control room, a piece of glass separated the small, vulnerable boy's body from the technicians who were preparing for the standard everyday procedure. The scan would soon begin. Michael's vital signs all looked good for the time being. As the thrum of the machine continued on, Michael's oxygen saturation levels began to drop. The anesthesiologist monitoring the situation soon grew alarmed and tried to adjust the oxygen from the wall outlet in the room, but the oxygen was not working as intended. The anesthesiologist immediately got the attention of the MRI techs, both of whom left the control room to investigate the faulty oxygen supply. The anesthesiologist was now alone in the room with Michael, and Michael's vitals were getting worse. Not wanting to leave the boy's side, he began calling out for someone to come help. These pleas for help were eventually heard by a staff member who was walking by the MRI suite door. The staff member, running on instinct, looked around for a solution and saw a handcart with oxygen cylinders sitting not too far away. The staff member scooped up the oxygen tank and, not giving it a second thought, began running towards the MRI suite. As the metal oxygen cylinder crossed into the room, the MRI's powerful magnetic field, an invisible force 30,000 times stronger than Earth's magnetic field, seized the cylinder and yanked it out of the staff member's arms. In that moment, the tank had become a high-speed projectile. It began flying towards the machine at around 20 to 30 feet per second. To put that into perspective, that's around 13 to 20 miles per hour or 21 to 32 kilometers per hour. As the tank closed in on the MRI machine, the anesthesiologist tried desperately to intercept, but couldn't. It only took mere seconds for everything to happen, as the tank struck the still sedated Michael in the head. The MRI room became a scene of horror as staff rushed to Michael's aid, wheeling him out of the room and rushing him into emergency care. For 2 days, doctors worked tirelessly to save the boy. The oxygen tank had caused a horrible skull fracture, and despite surgical intervention, the damage had just been far too severe. Michael would later pass on from his injuries. In the aftermath, the hospital would assume full responsibility for what had happened. But this was of little comfort to the family, who were dealing with an immeasurable amount of shock and grief. Their child had survived a brain tumor, only to have his life ended by a careless mistake. How could this have happened? Michael Columbini was the first known MRI-related death due to a projectile. The tragedy highlighted factors such as poor planning, improper emergency procedures, inadequate staff training, and failure to segregate unsafe MRI equipment. It's hard to say there's any silver lining with this story, but Michael's death would become a catalyst for change within the medical community. Some positive changes made were that hospitals now re-examine their safety practices to ensure only MRI-compatible equipment and oxygen tanks were used. The concept of a 4-zone system for MRI suites gained prominence. Zones are mapped out to restrict access and outline escalating levels of safety risk as one gets closer to the magnet. And enhanced screening procedures were put into place for anyone entering an MRI area. Finally, in 2010, Michael Columbini's family would finally reach a settlement of $2.9 million with the Westchester Medical Center. That money won't bring Michael back, and I'd like to end this story by sending my deepest condolences to all of Michael's family and friends. August 20th, 2017, at the Our Lady of Valm Hospital in Seville, Spain. 25-year-old Rocío Cortés Nunez arrived at the hospital with her husband, Jose, by her side. This was her third pregnancy, and she was excited to bring another life into this world. Soon, Rocío was taken to a room and given a bed. The nurse informed her that a doctor would be in to see her shortly, and so she did her best to try and find comfort in between the ongoing contractions. Fast forward a few hours, and doctors informed Rocío that she was going to need to undergo a C-section. That C-section was a success, and the couple soon welcomed a baby girl into the world. Not long after the birth of her daughter, a porter arrived to transport Rocío to the maternity recovery wing, which was located one level up on the third floor. The porter would pull Rocío into the hallway, and soon they were on their way towards the hospital elevators. When they arrived, the porter pressed the button, and the pair were soon entering an empty elevator. The third floor button was pressed, and the doors began to close, before suddenly they sprang back open. The porter stared on as the doors opened, closed, and then came to a stop with the doors wide open still. Confused and unsure what was going on, the porter then made the decision to exit the elevator and go try a different one. As the porter tried to pull her out of the elevator, the lift suddenly ascended. This caused Rocío's head to become trapped by the doors, while the rest of her body was dragged upward into the shaft. Within mere seconds, the inside of that elevator had become a scene within a horror movie. Firefighters and emergency personnel were rushed to the scene, where they worked tirelessly for over 2 hours to free the young mother. By the time she was released, it was far too late. Now, there are a lot of varying reports on what exactly happened. Some reports say she was cut in half, others say her head was taken clean off. What we do know for certain is that she suffered a severe cranial trauma. In a lot of ways, this story is very similar to the story I covered about Dr. Hitoshi Nikaido, who was a doctor that got his head stuck in a malfunctioning elevator. I honestly can't imagine how horrifying her final moments were. Such a happy day, bringing another life into this world, and to have your life ended the way that it was. It is so sad, and it is so tragic. And as I always do, I want to make sure I send my deepest condolences to all of Rocío Cortés Nunez's family, friends, and more. This next story is about a 5-year-old boy named Thomas Cooper, a curious, energetic, and bright little boy from Royal Oak, Michigan. Like many 5-year-olds, he loved to play and discover, and like his family, he simply wanted to feel his best. According to reports, Thomas had sleep apnea and ADHD, and in a desperate bid for help, his parents brought him to the Oxford Center. The Oxford Center is located in Troy, Michigan. It opened in 2008 after its founder and CEO, Dr. Tammy Peterson, witnessed the healing potential of hyperbaric oxygen therapy on her daughter, Gianna. The center promised Thomas and his family a new kind of relief through hyperbaric oxygen therapy. Hyperbaric oxygen therapy is a treatment where patients breathe pure oxygen inside a sealed, pressurized chamber. It was January 31st, 2025, and 5-year-old Thomas Cooper, alongside his mother, arrived at the Oxford facility. Today, Thomas was going to receive his 36th hyperbaric treatment. Inside the building, a large cylindrical hyperbaric chamber awaited the young boy. He soon climbed in and prepared for what he and his family now viewed as a routine treatment. His mother, Annie Cooper, watched on nearby as the chamber's operator, Aletta Muffet, placed pillows and a polyester blanket inside with Thomas. In the moment, no one seemed to recognize just how critical an error this was. See, in a pure oxygen environment, materials like polyester are highly flammable. To make matters worse, the blanket was fresh out of the dryer, leaving it extremely charged with static. The door to the chamber would soon close, and Thomas would get settled in. As oxygen filled the space, all it took was one small static spark. The blanket erupted as the fire spread explosively fast throughout the chamber. Within a matter of seconds, the hyperbaric chamber became engulfed in flames. Annie Cooper, standing just outside, had to witness the entire ordeal. She desperately tried to save her son, as any mother would, but there was nothing that could be done. She suffered significant burns to her arms in the process, and soon fire and police arrived at the scene, but there was nothing they could do to help. Thomas's life had ended almost as fast as the fire began. Following the tragedy, an investigation found the entire event preventable. The facility made numerous errors, including failing to perform daily maintenance checks and yearly equipment inspections, not having a doctor or safety supervisor on site, and not having a licensed technician perform the treatment. It was also discovered that the Oxford Center had failed to use a grounding strap on Thomas, which is essential to protect patients and equipment from static electricity. Authorities would eventually arrest and charge 4 people in connection with Thomas's death, 3 with second-degree murder, and the 4th with involuntary manslaughter and intentionally placing false information in medical records. The 3 charged with second-degree murder also face alternative counts of involuntary manslaughter, and a jury will decide which charge is most appropriate. The Oxford Center's head, Tamala Peterson, her primary assistant, Gary Markin, and the safety manager, Jeffrey Mosteller, are those charged with second-degree murder. Aletta Moffett, the chamber operator at the time of Thomas's death, was also charged with falsified medical records and involuntary manslaughter. At the end of the day, alleged greed and shortcuts led to one of the most horrible fates I've ever covered. I hope that justice is had in this case, and I want to send my deepest condolences to all of Thomas Cooper's family and friends. Big thank you to each and every one of you for tuning in to another episode. If you enjoy the content I make here on the channel, then please hit the like and subscribe button. Also, you can check the description box below and find the link to my merch store, a link to my membership tier for the channel. For only $2.99 a month, you can help support my channel further, and you get some cool perks to go with it. One of those perks is having your name listed here in the end of each of my videos, so a big thank you goes out to all my Cellar Dweller members. Also, if you'd like to submit any kind of story, please do so using the email link in the description box below. As always, I do all the research, writing, recording, and editing for the channel myself, so anything you do to help support this channel is greatly appreciated. And until next time, I will see you all again as we head back into the cellar.